Aray po. Aray po.
Kita na po. Bigay po kayo number. Bigay po kayo number, ma'am. Ano po, ma'am? Ay, nagbigay ng number.
Ma'am, any last word, ma'am? Anong gusto niyo, ma'am, isulat? Any last words? Ayaw. Okay po, ma'am.
Kasunod pong statement yan yung kay Mark. Hindi pa, ayan pa yung kasunod na statement kay Mark Rances.
Wala lang po yan, ma'am. Parang ano lang. Pag palungkutan ng kwento ng buhay, ma'am. Pag mas malungkot, mas maganda yung presyo.
Opo.
Yes po.
Remember the order of execution in a for loop. So the first thing that will be done is the initialization, and after that the condition will be checked, then the statements will be executed, and then the counter will be updated. And after that, this initialization will not be done again. So initialization is done only for one time. So after the statements are executed, the counter will be updated, then condition will be checked, and then if it is true, statements are executed again, then counter is updated, and then so on. So it goes on like that. That is the flow of control that we have in a for statement. So we saw that the output of this program is it prints hello there 10 times. Okay, so now let's take another example. So in this example, we want to print the sum of all the values from 1 to 10. That means 1 plus 2 plus 3 up to 10. And then we are going to use for loop here. So if you have watched the previous lecture, we did this using the while loop. So let's see how to do it using the for loop now. So here we are declaring and initializing one variable, that is sum, which is of type integer, and it is equal to 0. Now inside the for loop, we are initializing a variable called I, which is equal to 1, and then we are checking the condition saying if I is less than or equal to 10, and then we have a counter saying I++. Then we have the statement inside the for loop, which is sum plus equal to I. So this is the same like writing sum equal to sum plus I. So I want you to know the different ways of writing that we have. That is why I am using this kind of notation over here. So remember that you can also write sum equal to sum plus I. Now what will happen in this for loop? Initially the value of I is 1. So I is equal to 1. Now it will check the condition. Is 1 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is true. So sum equal to sum plus I. So what is the initial value of sum? 0. 0 plus value of I 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. Okay, so sum is equal to 1 now. Now I is incremented by 1. So I was 1. Now I becomes 2 because of this. And again condition is checked. Is 2 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is true. So sum equal to sum plus I. So what was the value of sum in the previous iteration? It was equal to 1. So sum equal to sum plus I means 1 plus what is the value of I now? It is equal to 2. So 1 plus 2 equal to 3. So sum becomes 3. And then I is incremented again. And again the condition is checked. And if it is true, it will be executed. So this is going to be continued till this condition is true. So there will be a point when I will be equal to 11. So at that time what will happen? This condition will become false. And at that time it will break and come out of this loop, and it will print sum of 1 to 10 is equal to sum. What is the latest value of sum that will be printed? And then we print a new line. Okay, so let's go and run this program in Visual Studio Code and see what will be the output. Okay, so we come to Visual Studio Code and I have written that same program that we saw, and here I have saved the file name with the name for for2.cpp. So let us compile this program. So we type g++ for2.cpp, press enter, and then we see program is compiled successfully without any errors, and the output file name is a.exe, and let's run that. So we run it, and then we see sum of 1 to 10 is equal to 55. Sum of 1 to 10 is equal to the sum which was calculated here using the for loop, which is equal to 55. So we see that it is working correctly. So we see that the output of this program is sum of 1 to 10 is equal to 55. Okay, now let's take another example where we will get the input from the user. We will ask the user up to which number he wants to print the sum. So here we printed it only up to 10. So we will ask the user till which number he wants to print, and up to that number we will print the sum, starting from 1 till the number the user enters. So let's try to do that using for loop. So here in this third example we will try to do that. So we have our program here, and we have the sum initialized to 0, and we are declaring another variable called val, which is also of the type integer, and this is used for getting the input from the user. So whatever number the user enters, we will store it in this variable called val. So here we are writing a cout statement saying enter the number till which the sum has to be calculated, and then we are accepting that value that the user enters using the cin statement, and we are putting it in the variable called val. So val contains the number that the user has entered. Now we are running a for loop here. So we see we are initializing I is equal to 1, then we are putting a condition here saying as long as I is less than or equal to val. Now what is val? The value that the user has entered. So in the previous example we gave the value is equal to 10 here. It was a hard-coded value, but here we are giving a value that the user enters, and then we are giving the counter updation here I++. Now inside the for loop we are writing a statement sum plus equal to I, which means sum equal to sum plus I. So what it essentially is going to do is that this loop is going to run as long as I is less than or equal to the value that the user enters, and then this statement will be executed and the counter will be updated again and again till this condition becomes false. Then it will break out from the loop and it will print out the sum of 1 to val. What is val? The value that the user has entered is equal to sum, that is the latest value of sum that is calculated inside this for loop, and then we print an end line. Okay, so let us try to run this program.
Isa na po, ma'am.
nagawa ko. Yung isa hindi pa po.
Ito po.
Kita na ma'am. Yung isa po hindi ko po nagagawa ko. May naano lang po ako. May emergency lang po. Kaya sa baba. Yes po ma'am.
Yung inano kaya yung isa kanina hindi ko nagawa ka.
Okay na po, ma'am. May presenta po ba, ma'am? Okay po.
see if it is working. Okay, so I have that same program written here in our Visual Studio Code. So let us try to run this program. I have saved the file name with the name 43.cpp. So let us compile this program. So g++ 43.cpp, we enter, and we see that the program is compiled successfully without any errors, and the output file name is a.exe. So let us run the output file. So if we run that output file, it is asking enter the number till which the sum has to be calculated. So let us enter 10 and see. So we see it says the sum of 1 to 10 is equal to 55. So val is equal to 10 here. So the loop runs till 10 and then it prints the sum of 1 to 10. Okay, let's run it once more and enter another value. So here this time let me enter 100. So here it says the sum of 1 to 100 is equal to 5050. So we see that this loop is working correctly. So it starts from 1, goes till the value that the user has entered, and it is printing the sum of the numbers from 1 till that value. Alright, so that is how the for statement works. So remember the order in which it executes: the initialization part, then the condition, and then the execution of the statements, and then the increment. So after that, in the second iteration, again we check the condition, then statements are executed, and then the increment. So it goes on again and again till the condition becomes false. So that is how the for loop works. So we see that is the use of the for loop as well. It is used for performing some operation or running a piece of code again and again. So that is why we call it a loop. So I hope this lecture about for statement and how to run for loops are clear to you. Thank you for watching and see you. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about reading an unknown number of inputs. So in the previous lectures, while we were studying about the while loop and the for loop, we have seen how to take a fixed number of inputs, or we ask the user to enter a number, and that is considered as a fixed number, and that number of inputs were taken and we were working on that. Now, what if we don't know the number of inputs that we want to take? In that case, we need to see how we can work with it in C++ programming. So that is what we are going to discuss in this lecture. So let's get started. So as I said, so far we have been dealing with fixed number of inputs. So in the previous cases, we have seen how to add all numbers from 1 till a fixed number and from 1 till a fixed number given by the user. So this was what we studied when we discussed about the while loop and the for loop. So there we saw that in one case we gave a fixed number and we were adding the numbers from 1 till that fixed number. So for example 5. So if we gave 5 as a fixed number, then we were adding from 1 till 5. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. And then in the next case, we asked the user to enter the number till which he wants to do the addition. So if the user has entered a number, let's say 4. So that 4 is treated as the fixed number, and then we added 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. So that is what we have been doing so far, that is working with the fixed number of inputs. Now the question is, how can we add an unknown number of values? That means we are going to get values from the user, but we are not sure how many values are going to be there. It could vary from time to time. So in that case, how are we supposed to add those values? So we have to ask the user to enter some numbers, and we don't know how many numbers the user is going to enter, and then we add them using our program. So this is what we have to accomplish, and we will see how we can do this using C++ programming. So as I said, we have to keep reading the numbers until there are no more numbers to read. So we will ask the user to enter the numbers, and the user will keep on entering numbers from the keyboard. So as long as the user is entering numbers from the keyboard, we have to keep accepting those numbers, and then a time will come when there are no more numbers to read. And when is that? We will see that when we move ahead. So till that, we have to read all the numbers, and then we have to add them. So here is an example. So if the user enters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we ask the user to enter some numbers, and the user enters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in this case there are 5 numbers. So we have to add all these 5 numbers, and we have to say that the sum is equal to 15, which is the sum of these 5 numbers. Or for example, let's say in another case the user enters just 3 numbers, like here 4, 1 and 3. So we have to add this 4 plus 1 plus 3 and say that the sum is equal to 8. So this is what we want to do, and let's see how we can do this. So here is a program that is going to help us do what we just explained, that is reading an unknown number of inputs. So here we have our header specified and we have our main function, and inside the main function we have two variables of the type integer, which are sum and value, and the initial value of sum is set to 0 and the value of this variable value is set to 0 as well. That means they are both initialized to 0. Okay, now here in order to read until the end of file, calculating a running total of all values read. Now what do we mean by this? Let's see. So as I said, we have to keep on adding the values that is given by the user. So as long as the user is entering something or a valid number, we have to keep adding it. So for that we are going to use a while loop. So here we are using a while statement, and we have studied about while in one of the previous lectures. So if you have not watched it, you can watch it first in order to understand how the while loop works. So in this while statement, we know that we need to have a condition, and as long as the condition is true, the statement or the block of code inside this while will be executed. So here, what is the condition? The condition is a cin statement. We see that we are saying std cin, and we are taking the value that is actually entered by the user. So we see that we are using the iStream or the cin as a condition inside while loop. So this is something different that we are seeing now. Usually we used to give some condition like we have seen in the previous lectures, but here we are treating the cin itself as a condition. Now we will see when it is going to be true. This means that as long as the user is entering a valid number, then we have to execute what is written inside the while block. So when is this statement going to be true? This statement will be true as long as the user enters a valid number. And what is a valid number? We see that value is an integer. So as long as the user keeps on entering a valid integer, this is going to give a true value. And as long as it is true, this will be executed. So inside this while we have this statement written here, sum plus equal to value, which is the same as sum equal to sum plus value. So whatever the user is entering, we are just keep on adding it to the variable called sum, whose initial value is 0. So suppose the user enters 1. So here we see that user enters 1. So this cin statement is true. So it will come here and it will add 1 to sum. So what is the initial value of sum? 0. So 0 plus 1, that will be added. And then it will come back to the while condition and it will check if the user is entering any other value again. So if the user is again entering a proper value, let's say the user enters 2, which is also a valid integer. So it will again come to this while loop and it will execute sum plus equal to value, which means sum equal to sum plus value. So the previous value of sum was 1. So now the user enters 2. So the new value of sum will be 1 plus 2, which is equal to 3. So this will keep on happening as long as this part is true. And when will it not be true? It will not be true when we enter an end of file value, or if we enter an invalid value here. That means if it is not an integer, at that time this will become false, and then we will come out of this while and then it will print out this cout statement sum equal to sum, that is the latest value of the variable sum, and then we print a new line. Okay, now we see here that in this while statement there is only one line after that. There is only one statement after this while. So that is why we are not putting it under curly braces. So if you are having more than one statement inside your while, then you need to put the curly braces. But if you are having just one statement, it's okay not to put the curly braces as well. Okay, so here the important thing is this condition over here. So we see that the iStream is used as a test condition. Why do I say iStream? Because cin is the console input, which is a part of the input stream. So this is used as the test condition. So we need to talk a little bit more about this to understand how this is working. So we will talk a little more about using iStream as a condition and what are the things that happen when we use iStream as a condition. So this was the statement that we had, that is a condition inside our while. We are using this iStream, that is cin, as the test condition for our while. So when we do this, when we use an iStream as a condition, the effect is to test the state of the stream. So we are going to test the state of the stream, that is the state of this std cin. So std cin will have a true value if the value entered here is a valid number. So if the stream is valid, that is, if the stream hasn't encountered an error, then the test succeeds. So as I said, if the user is entering a proper value here, which is an integer, and if it is not an end of file value, then this will always be true. So that is why it says the test succeeds. Now an iStream becomes invalid when we hit end of file or encounter an invalid input such as reading a value that is not an integer. So this is the condition where this test condition will become false. So it will become false when this scene will encounter an end of file value. Now what is an end of file value? In case of Windows, if you press Ctrl plus Z on your keyboard and then press enter, that is treated as end of file value. And in case of operating systems like Linux, if you press Ctrl D and then if you press enter, that is treated as end of file value. So we will see that when we run our program. So if this scene is encountering an end of file value or if it is encountering an invalid input. So what is invalid input here? We saw that value was an integer. So if we enter a value which is not an integer, then it becomes an invalid value. So at that time, this will become false. So an iStream that is in an invalid state will cause the condition to yield false. So that is what we just said. Okay, so now let's just go back to our program again since we have understood how using iStream as a condition works. Alright, so coming back to our program, we will take this program and we will run it in our Visual Studio Code to see if it is working properly and if it is able to read unknown number of inputs and add them together correctly or not. Alright, so we come to our Visual Studio Code and here I have that same program written down and now we are going to compile this program. So the name of our file is unip.cpp. So let me compile it using the G++ compiler. So we type G++ unip.cpp and we see that the program has compiled successfully and there are no errors, and here a.exe is the output file that is generated. So let us run the output file. So we type /a.exe and we press enter and we see that the program has been executed. Now we see that there is a cursor over here. Now what does this mean? This is waiting for the input from the user. So it has come to this line and it is waiting for input from the user. This cin is trying to get executed. So it is waiting here. So let me enter some values. So let's say 1. Now in order to enter the next value, you can either enter it using space or by pressing the enter or return key on your keyboard. So let me use the enter key. So here I will say 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I've entered 5 values and I can enter how many ever values I want. Now after this 5, I want to stop. These are all the numbers that I want to enter. So how to come out of this while loop? So in order to come out of this while loop, I have to either enter the end of file value or an invalid value. So let me enter the end of file value that I talked about, which is Ctrl plus Z. So Ctrl Z. I press Ctrl Z on my keyboard and then I press enter. Now we see it came out of this while loop because it encountered the end of file value and then it printed the value of sum, which is equal to 15. So the sum of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 is 15. So we see that it is executed correctly. Okay, now let's take one more example. Let us run this program once more. Okay, so I have run this program once more. Again, it is waiting for the input from the user. So this time let me enter 2 and instead of giving enter, let me use space this time. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 3, 4. So these many values I want to enter. Now in order to break from this loop, this time I will enter a value that is not an integer. That means I'm not going to enter the end of file value, but let me enter a value that is not an integer. So let me enter a letter over here, a character. Let's say I entered N. Now what will happen? If I press enter now, we see that it has broken out from the while loop and it has printed the sum over here. So the sum of these numbers that I have entered is 22 and I have entered an invalid entry here, which is not an integer, in order to break from my while loop. So that is how we can accept an unknown number of values from the user and we can add them together. So with that, I hope you have understood how we can use the iStream as a test condition, and using that we can read unknown number of inputs from the user and we can break out from the while loop by entering the end of file value or an invalid value, which will break from the while loop. So I hope
One question po. What if po pag naglagay pa ng number after nung N? Yung sa ano po, diba po naglagay po siya ng N? What if naglagay pa siya ng number after nung N? Pwede pa po ba siya
Yes po.
Thank you po.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Thank you and goodbye po.
Salamat po, ma'am.
Thank you po.
Yes po.
Thank you po.
Bye po, ma'am. Thank you po.
Thank you po.
Bye.
Yes po, ma'am.
Thank you po.